I'm going to be right-sized. Sasha Antoun joins us from ReAlign Detox. She graduated from the Los Angeles Training Institute of Drug and Alcohol Studies and has been intentional about her work in the detox and substance abuse industry. For her, it is a calling, so she talks about putting her personal work first and taking managed growth steps. She loves the pace and intensity of detox and getting individuals off to the right start towards recovery. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery Podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery, ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery Podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today on the podcast, Kurt and I get to talk with Sasha Antoun. Sasha is the business development at ReAlign Detox. Sasha is an all hands on deck type of a person. She is passionate about mental health and substance abuse recovery. She graduated from the Los Angeles Training Institute of Drug and Alcohol Studies. And her motto for life is, I will always strive to be better and do better because I love what I do. I love that. Thanks for being on today, Sasha.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me.
It's kind of fun. So unlike some of our guests, who are in different places, you work in the detox arena, which is kind of that starting point of where people sometimes start in recovery. And I'm curious, and maybe we should start here, is give us some background, maybe a little bit, as to how you ended up working at ReAlign and kind of some history.
Totally. I remember when people used to ask me how I got started working in the industry, there was almost this little bit of shame that would pop up because I didn't want to. I really didn't. I remember being in sober living, and I got a call from a person, and they were like, hey, would you manage this sober house? And I was like, man, I don't think I'm the right fit for something like that. I'm a sensitive person, I'm really feelsy, and I don't know how who I am would interplay with a setting like that. And I like that from the beginning. I've taken it very seriously. I've never taken what we do lightly. But I think about 3 months later from that point, I got a call again from the same individual. And they were like, you don't understand. I need a female house manager, and it needs to be you. And at the time I was like reading The Alchemist. I was like contemplating life-changing decisions and all these things. And now I carry much less shame about it for the fact that, I think there's definitely something to be said for answering a calling. And at first I wasn't ready, but at that point then I was ready to, answer the calling, to take the step of working into this field. I have done, so that was starting in a lower level of care setting, and I've done pretty much everything except being a direct clinician working in client care in lower levels of care. Started house managing, driver, UA tech, front desk, administrative assistant, operations supervisor, with some intake coordination stuff, to then doing what I do now.
What was that shame?
Man, that shit, because I think what happens is that shame was I fiercely love what I do now. So it's almost embarrassing to be like, I didn't want to do it. And I thought I couldn't do it. I think that is like the greater truth in that. I thought that I wouldn't be good at it, and it scared me because I mean, going to treatment changed my life.
Kind of the imposter thing, just
Totally.
not wanting to let people down, not having that like sense of self. Would it be like assurance or respect for yourself? Just not thinking you could do it.
Maybe. I think it's a little like combination of those things. Like, who am I? I mean, really what the basis of it is that who am I to step into this space and like try to guide these people? I mean, I still feel like that most of the time.
Well, and I think that just recovery in and of itself has had so much stigma and so much shame associated with it, right? Because we beat ourselves up for what we do when we're using and the relationship damages. Do you think any of that played a role?
I think it would be, I would be remiss to say that it didn't. Absolutely. Like being in recovery myself, it has continually and still is this grand journey to figure out like what am I capable of and like why am I stopping myself from that over and over again, because everything that says I can't and I won't is 100% in my head. And every time that I have thankfully had people in my life that have been willing to nudge me past that, I have been more than grateful.
So then talk a little about your recovery journey and what that was like.
Yeah, my recovery journey, like that's a TED Talk in and of itself. I figure I could probably take up some time with that. So I'll try to figure out how to condense it as best as possible.
Well, I'll tell you too, though, the story is the best part, at least wise from my perspective. It's like if all you do is tell your story, we win. Everybody wins.
And I love that. I do think it is so powerful, that prospect of storytelling and listening. There's like really a collective healing that happens on both ends that I'm definitely grateful to be a part of. So my recovery journey, man, was just as turbulent as can be. And it was every stereotypical characteristic marker of you would expect of like a young woman, and that ends up going down a different path. It was as cookie cutter and textbook as you would imagine. I mean, starting very experimentally, and I was in high school and just drifted my way through every substance until I ended up on heroin and methamphetamine. And then I did a very sizable amount of damage in a short period of time, very thankfully. So by the time I was 20 years old, I decided that it was enough and I was tired. I was just so tired and I wanted to do it my way so bad, but it was working out so poorly. And that was the most recent time that I had gone to treatment and did a full kind of continuum of care. Really just adopted this mindset of like, I'm scared and I'm willing to do what you tell me to. And I just laid it all out on the table and was like, here's what it is. Here's everything I got. Tell me what to do with it. Tell me how to put it back together. I don't want it anymore. And like that kind of attitude, honestly, is like the very simplified version of like how I've tried to approach my recovery process. While I have done so much trial and error along the way, I mean, being actively involved in like 12-step recovery communities has also played a really large role in my life consistently. But it has been a continual journey, really simply of saying, like, I am just tired of trying to do it my way and trying to think that I can manage. And there are people that are much better and well suited to helping show me what to do and showing me how to get to where I need to be, and just being willing to listen to that.
That's incredible. Do you ever see a conflict or a challenge between that idea of what am I capable of and being the best that you can be, and then being open and humble, that's the word I'm going to use, willing to give it all up and surrender everything? Do you see a difficult time with those two?
I totally see what you're saying. I think for me, the kind of like definition that I adopt for humility would be right-sized. So that also means that I'm not going to like shrink myself. It means that I'm like in direct proportion or exact proportion to how I'm supposed to be as it relates to like all things in my higher power and all these other like things. It means I'm not being too small and I'm not being too big, and I'm somewhere in the truth of like who and where I'm supposed to be. So I think if I am like actively seeking to find that spot, there is an area in there where like I can strive to do and be more, but not also go back to then reach for the, oh, I totally know what I'm doing and I got this and I don't need to learn from anyone anymore.
I love that. Well, and having that great support network is another huge piece of that, because when people love you, they tell you when you're messing up, right? They're like, they have no problem going, let's maybe check that somewhere.
100%. I mean, that's definitely like a chronic joke between a few of the close people in my life right now, is like, are they even really your friends if you love what they say all the time? You know, I definitely am grateful that I have found quite a sizable recovery community that not only knows how to have fun and not take things too seriously, but also knows when to take things seriously and tell me if I am, you know, like not making great decisions.
That's cool. And I think that's so important and valuable for anyone. I don't care who you are. If you're in recovery from life, we need those good, solid people around us. I love
100%.
that. So you talked about really kind of getting serious into recovery at about the age of 20, which I think that's kind of young for somebody to really turn it around and go, yeah, I'm done with this. What were some of your pivotal moments that brought you there?
That's a fantastic question. I think, like I said, I really had this go fast, go hard mission about my personality and how I was approaching life at the time. And because of that, I had a really sizable amount of consequences happen really quickly. I was no stranger to the legal system. I was no stranger to destroying the relationships in my life. I had very few left at that time. Strangely enough, I have had experienced homelessness before, and that is not even where I was at when I finally did decide to like surrender. It was much more of an emotional kind of bottom that I had experienced of, you know, I have all these material things now, but for some reason it's still insufficient. Even with the substances and with the life that I thought I wanted so bad, I have these things and nothing is working. Nothing is changing how I feel. And that was enough for me, that kind of more emotional stop in the road of, I just can't do it anymore. Of course, with a very forceful and loving nudge from my mother as well. I mean, I just chemically didn't have the insight at the time to like wholeheartedly want it either. And I think that's like an okay thing to talk about. I didn't know that I was going to stay. I didn't know that this is actually what I wanted. It was just kind of the next right indicated step, along with some forceful loving pushing that I was a bit resentful over at the time. Because I just wasn't chemically able to make sound decisions, you know? That's why I love working in a detox setting. I know where my clients are at, and I know that our physiology is just angry, you know? So yeah, I definitely connect to a higher level of care setting because I can still connect to that feeling really well.
That's I love the way you talk about that, and I'm gonna kind of bounce off of the fact that you said you're just kind of this really sensitive feeling person, and here you are in the really hard, angry place of recovery, dealing with people that are angry. They don't want to be in treatment. You know, they're not in a place where they can do that. How do you make that work?
The way that I make it work is consistently and continually, diligently doing the work on myself. That is the way and the only way that it can and will work. I need to be grounded in things that it takes for me to be safe and sane and sober every day. And that is like a non-negotiable. Do I fall short of that sometimes? Yes. Do I think my priorities, like I have had those kind of discoveries about myself of what works over time, but what I find and kind of like a philosophy that I hold really tightly when it comes to working with clients in substance abuse and mental health settings is that like I get to share the effects of a regulated nervous system with my clients. So if I am doing the work on myself to self-regulate and to regulate my nervous system, and when I'm showing up in a genuine way because I've done the work, so I don't need to like hide my experience, I'm showing up in a way where I am like tone match my tone and like the, body language and all of these other things that comprise our communication, like they're all congruent with what I'm saying, because there's nothing that I have to like hide or swallow back when I'm there. I get to show up in an authentic way for them and with them because I've done the work on myself. And that really does almost like in a silent way speak or feel like volumes. That is like something I'm really passionate about. Is the only reason I get to work in the level of care that I'm so passionate about is because I have to continually do the work and establish that sense and feeling of safety. They're coming in, we're in fight or flight, nothing feels or is safe. Like emotionally, physiologically, like everything's firing and it does not feel okay, right? That's why we're in this like constant attempt to like regulate, whether that looks like substances or something else. We're trying so hard. So when I get to show up and kind of share in what it feels like to just step down for a moment and maybe be safe in this moment, that is like where a lot of the magic happens for me.
I can see why there's magic in that. And I love the way you describe it, which means you've done your work, right? You've done a lot of work. And you get how much we reflect to other people through our body language, those mirror neurons that are always firing. I mean, you're not going to pull one over on somebody that's in the heart of their addiction, right? They're watching for it. Safety is a big piece, and if there's something not true about you, they will find it, they will seek it out, and they will hunt you down and make sure that you know it.
100%. That's why it's like so much of my job, I just have to show up and be genuine, and my clients see, hear, and feel that. And sometimes even that might not be well received, and that has like nothing to do with like it doesn't change my opinion about them. That doesn't change, anything other than I can see what's going on, or maybe they're trying to tell me what's going on without being able to tell me what's going on. Like either way, they're communicating in some way, whether it's angrily or not, it can still be like received. And then I can regulate and show them in that moment, like, okay, we're going to change a dynamic here though. If you are doing this, if you are angry, maybe you're used to different responses to that. My responses right now are not going to change.
Powerful. You talked about, and I can hear it as you describe this. You talked about it being a calling, which, some people talk about it being a calling, some people don't, but share a little bit of what that looks like from your perspective.
What that looks like from my perspective is, from the moment that I said yes to the phone call that one day, just in my sober living, to this decision that sounded scary and almost a little not smart to make, but the entire trajectory of my life has changed. My trajectory of my education has changed. I have found my passion. I didn't think it could be possible working in such a cohesive and facilitating growth type of environment. Everything has changed since that moment. My life would not look the way that it does today had I not answered that call in the way that I did. And I'm so grateful that, I got to show up and talk to a school counselor and be like, I am in love with what I do. Can we work backwards? Like, what works for what I'm doing? Okay, we're going to pursue a clinical route. I'm on the phone. That makes sense. And then maybe take some marketing classes too, because that's just what makes sense with what I'm doing. Like, that's unheard of. I do not and try not to lose sight of how unheard of it is that I can be so grateful for my job and feel so passionate about it, like at the age that I'm at. I know not everyone has that experience where they get to talk to their friends and like to the personal people in their lives about their job the exact same way I talk to anyone in a professional setting. I joke with my boss. I'm like, the same way I talk about you on a tour is how I talk about you to my best friend. And that is not something a lot of people have. So I think that has definitely been like divinely guided in a way that I could not have constructed. And I was reluctant to.
Well, and for sure, right? But not everybody holds the same belief structures and all of that. But I love the way you talk about that in the authenticity piece of being able to come to work and be who you are in every aspect of your life. Not everyone knows or feels that they have permission to do that. And when you can't do that, the incohesion of that is so disruptive to our internal selves, right? Sometimes drives us to drugs. So I love the way you talk about that and that authenticity and being able to show up exactly how you are and honoring what that means and the qualities and maybe some of the weaknesses that come with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like what that looks like real time is like if I'm going through something in my personal life, I have to show up for it in that moment. I don't get to swallow it because I can't afford for it to come out and happen at work or with my clients. I want to, when I am on the phone or on site talking with them, like have them feel as seen and heard as humanly possible. And a big part of that is like being able to see and hear myself and know where I am in relation to them right now and how I'm showing up in this world. Like, how can I expect to be a safe container for my clients if I am not willing to do that for myself too?
I love it. Share some of the work that you do. We've talked about it a little bit, but kind of talk about the role of detox in that, recovery process and what the goal is and maybe what's next.
Totally. So detox, we're almost like, I'm a very visual person. We're kind of like a decontamination room. Like you pull in, the door closes, there's like stuff that has to happen before the other door opens that you can then pass through. We are the threshold between everything that is outside that door and like a life of recovery. There is like the chaos and the destruction and the pain and the running and the manipulating and all these survival tactic-y things that tend to manifest in some very unsavory ways. Like that's what's on the other side of the door that people are trying to like knock on and walk into with us. And so then we let them in. And a large part of our role is, again, like talking about that safety. We need them to now start going through this process with us, with our staff, with medical staff, with clinicians. They have come to be with us to stabilize medically, and we need to make sure that they are physiologically going to be walked through to the process of abstinence, if that is their journey, or this medication-assisted treatment. We need them to be walked through the process of whatever substance or plural they might be on to safely transition to that next phase and what our goal is. And that can look like a bunch of different things, and a lot of different things can happen along the way. But what we are trying to do is like establish as much as possible some sense of normalcy as we walk someone back to the process of living in an entirely different world. We have previously been in this like underworld, substance abuse or alcoholism or whatever it is. So now we're trying to, it's not just like the easiest skip and jump to like come back to quote unquote, right, air quotes, the real world. That process needs to be, and gratefully can be, guided. Everything from like the emotions and everything that's coming up just as we process where we just were to where we are now. I could probably rant forever on this. So much happens in that first initial phase of treatment. And that is what sets them up for the rest of treatment, because detox alone is insufficient. I mean, discharge planning is a huge part of what we do too. We are just the starting point. We are the door opening, and we want people to come inside and get safe and just sit down for a second, right? And like establish these feelings of safety. And then we need to figure out as much as we can figure out with the short period of time and see what we can unpack and hold and guide and use what we know to make sure that they're set up for as best success as possible based off what our goals are. So it's the transition point. It's like the door opening. Everything else starts from this moment. Ideally, the rest of their recovery and life from that point forward will start with that moment with us.
And you kind of talk about it on more of a general high level, but how much can you really do in detox? There's controversy over, they're detoxing. They can't really do a lot of functioning. So what are the limits and what can you really do? Because you've alluded to it, but talk about that a little more.
So I think it's not given enough credit what establishing a sense of safety can do, but we do very actively bear in mind where our clients are physiologically at while they're with us. We cannot think, like, we're not doing EMDR. It's not happening. It's not safe to do so in that time frame that we have them with us. That's too short, and where our brain is at is not at a healthy point for something like that to start. So in terms of like therapeutic modalities and effectiveness, like you're right, we cannot get too intricate or complex, but what we do need to do, and what it is our part to do, is to still be properly armed with all of the tools and therapeutic modalities that can and will be effective for whatever is going to show up. For some people, there's not a lot emotionally coming out right now, and we are just really focusing on psychoeducation and water and food consumption and some ADLs and some CBT maybe. We start trying to do a bit of a titration. Let's say they're at the end of detox and going to be transferring to a residential. We do want you involved in some groups at the end of detox, so you will have a smoother transition into a residential program, or if they do a little bit of residential with us as well. That is really what we want to see, is a smooth and safe transition based off what our goals are and the treatment plan is. So that is going to look a little bit differently for everyone. But we do have to be well prepared. Sometimes a lot starts coming up right away as soon as those chemicals are removed from the brain, and what we were trying to run from is a little bit louder now. Do I think that we are like, detox is not the end all be all? You know what I mean? I think so much more. We're scratching the surface. So in that regard, I agree, but it almost sounds a bit dismissive to like how important detox is, because we need it to like set everyone up in the right direction. And I hear it from our clients. Like, I know what can be accomplished when I do alumni calls, and I hear them saying like, oh my God, can you tell so-and-so that I say hi? Because I still remember when they were staying up and they talked to me, like those are pivotal moments when we are just so sick and we just feel awful and our skin is crawling and I had another panic attack and all these things. We're remembering the people that showed up for us in that way. Those are the people that allow us to stay one more moment, maybe one more day, so we get closer to what that full clinical treatment plan is for us.
I love it. I love the way you talk about safety. I mean, really, if that's the focus of their stay there, right? Getting, the detox, of course, and getting that attention, but the safety, because I think that's where every therapeutic approach starts, in my head anyway, is safety. You've got to create safety in relationships, safety within yourself, safety in your environment. And I like to hear you say that, yeah, somebody sat with me, maybe for hours while I'm really struggling and just coming out, going out of my mind. And they just stayed there with me and they let me yell at them and they let me do, whatever happens in that. And they didn't yell back and they didn't react to me. And, those kinds of things that you've been talking about. I think sometimes we may underestimate just how important safety is, but it is vital. You're not going anywhere without it.
Totally. As dorkily as I'd love to get excited about how much time I know our physician spends with each resident and how beautiful and like thorough the health and physical exams are. I mean, yeah, sometimes we get like they were so nice, but really it's those moments where the safety is that feeling of they were riding with me through that. That is what I find people end up holding on to most.
Very powerful. And I imagine that, once you've put them through, and they don't get to stay very long for detox, right? I mean, talk about the length of stay for what you're specifically doing with them.
Totally. And I always caution on the front end too. I'm not the medical director and I'm certainly not the end all be all when it comes to duration of stay, but the more typical time frames that we see, if someone is going to be with us just for standalone detox, we do residential in certain instances as well, but probably standalone detox most frequently. Depending on the substance, probably 7-day time frame, give or take some days in either direction, just depending on what the medication protocol looks like and where their vitals and their withdrawal scale assessments are at. So it's definitely a team decision as we assess where they're at day by day and figuring out what that process looks like as the medication protocol's changing. Maybe we're through a taper, maybe it's taper ended yesterday and we need to see how they're doing for a couple days post taper. I think that gets overlooked a ton. So that can look very different for a lot of people, especially if we're looking at something like a methadone detox, for example. Then we know we're looking at a series of weeks. But more typical instances, give or take a few days in either direction, could be a 7-day time frame. And that is just an absolute tiny snapshot in someone's life, but it feels like the longest 7 days in the world.
True story. Long 7 days, but it's such a brief amount of time that you get to touch them, and yet you can make such a profound difference in their lives. And so they get done with detox, and I say that very loosely, get done with, because they're detoxing for quite some time, the serious portion of detox. And I'm imagining that you guys work with a lot of different residential facilities and have working relationships with them, and you're really just an arm of what they offer. Talk about some of those relationships and how you make that work.
Absolutely. That is part of why I love my job so much is business development. I get to be out in the community looking for and vetting these resources to see who is going to be the best fit for whoever might end up in front of us at the facility. My program director and myself kind of triage this process. He has a form that he kind of goes over with everyone that assesses like what our goals are, what we've seen work, what hasn't worked, things like that. We need to know those things. We need to know because it helps propel us in a direction moving forward. And then he and I kind of get together with them and start really honing in on, okay, what do we think the best options are going to be here geographically in terms of therapeutic modalities, in terms of any co-occurring disorders, comorbid medical conditions, age range, gender, like all of these things. We start playing, I call it the mental chess of, finding the perfect puzzle piece. And that is like where the magic happens, is when we are able to find that perfect puzzle piece. And I'm grateful we are in a area that has a lot of different options. So we get to really explore what that is going to look like real time and have been able to develop some relationships with people that, man, I do the alumni calls. I know how it went. And I love when I get to hear someone say, like, man, the experience that I had was with you guys was great, but you did such a good job, or whatever that looks like, or them just saying thank you and getting them in contact with the right people. That is something really, really special, because it's someone's life. That's the heaviest and most beautiful and terrifying part about it, is it's someone's life. Like the trajectory that is their life has the potential to be changed at any moment, and where they go next in their next continuum of care plays a large role in that. That's where they're going to spend even more time. That's where they're really going to get in it with the therapist. That's where, you know what I mean, all this stuff gets to happen that we don't see, and we just hope we get to catch snippets of down the line. So that's what that looks like, is so much of me staying connected with people that I would feel more than comfortable if there was like a loved one or a family member, myself, God forbid, whatever that would be, knowing that I trust them with lives that are important to me means that would be good enough for lives of my clients.
Super powerful. I'm curious because a lot of roles out there are, your role only at a residential treatment facility or in an outpatient, but I hear you being really attached to the detox portion of that. What keeps you there as opposed to, moving into a different continuum part of the care process?
I wish I had like a more eloquent description for this, but almost in a joking way, the way that I describe it, it just perfectly fits my kind of crazy. You know what I mean? It just meshes well. I think we all find our environments. We all find our place. If we're like called here, there's all these different subsects, like where you guys are in. You have found your place in that space of us all coming together in this wild community to like support each other and more importantly our clients. So I really like I don't even know how to describe it, the intensity. And I almost joke, I think like with lower level of care, a different approach works because they're feeling better. They're out in the community. We're needing structure. We're needing integration skills. We're needing like a lot of different things. But this is how I've been able to tap into like my softer side and still be effective, is I get to be with people through some of their hardest moments physically and emotionally.
Which is such a good example of you being right-sized. Right? Because I think there are a lot of clinicians who are like, no, I don't need the first week. Like, clean it up just a little bit. I want to talk. I want to get into the brain. I don't want to deal with right out the gate crazy.
Yeah.
I'll do the 3 months, So it's kind of like the SWAT team of the recovery industry a little bit,
I love that. It really is. It is just the triage unit, man. It's something like I've never experienced before, but I love the kind of 24/7 component of it in some strange way. I think that intensity and that type of seriousness really resonates with who I am and how I want to show up in this space.
That's fantastic. And the goal, right? The goal is that they all become alumni, successful at the recovery that they chose and that they're working at. And maybe talk about that just a little bit as we wind up. Talk about, you've been through recovery. You're not done. I hear you say you still have to do your work. When a trigger comes up or something happens, you've got to go do your work in order for you to show up on the job the way you want to show up. What does that look like for you as you're at this stage of your recovery?
Totally. At this stage of my recovery, it looks like a lot of different things that have shifted over time. So I am about 5 years in, a little over 5 years in at this point, and there is a continual kind of, like I've touched on, spirit of turning it over. I have a very heavy spiritual component to my recovery on a daily basis, being right-sized, knowing when I need to listen, knowing when I need to ask questions. And one of the harder and more valuable things is consistency with the things that I turn to. So having like a morning routine, my meditation, carrying with me this spirit of altruism, knowing that if I do not give it away in a personal sense and keeping like a personal and professional recovery separate, I think is a huge part of me effectively showing up in my professional capacity at work. I think there are, some clear distinctions that I need to make of what am I doing that is for my recovery when I am not at work, and what am I doing that is allowing me to bring those like principles and tools with me when I get to show up in a professional way. And so much of, I think, what we hear of everyone say to do, there's nothing that I do that is new or, too trendy and different. I do what probably many of the people who I've even heard of or listened to on this podcast do. I mean, prayer is a part of my life, meditation, consistency. going to my recovery groups and things like that is a massive part of my life that needs to be consistent. Along with the more like clinical work that I still do, like a therapist, and like having all of these tools to turn to, I turn to all of them because I don't want to find out which one is the one that's like really working and like which one can I live without. Like I don't want to take any more risks now. So I try and do my joke with my friend, I try and do all the things because all the things seem to work. So like staying actively involved in therapy, I mean, watching for my behaviors, who am I showing up as? What are my intentions in this moment? How can I show up better? I'm like, man, I think a big part of it is asking myself a lot of questions on a daily basis, and being willing to look at the answers and then do something about the answers is another really big part of what I have to do to maintain that sense of kind of serenity in my recovery process, because it has been and will continue to be such an amazing and bumpy and wild journey that I would have never expected. And I want to keep finding out how it goes. So I just am going to keep doing all the things that have gotten me here so far.
Fantastic answer. I love it. And it's that way. And I don't think I don't know, I'm going to speak for myself. I wouldn't be happy unless it was a little crazy, right? Because it would get too boring. It's like, it's got to be a little crazy. And we got to bring that to it almost every day. And it's really cool for me, I'll speak for me again, is that when I know I have friends that I can go to, people that are close to me that I can go to and get that connection need, right? Because we all know that the opposite of addiction is connection. And even if I'm agitated and irritable and I don't really know what's wrong, if I go connect with somebody, it just feels better, right? And so it can be really simple. And I like the way you said that. It's not necessarily that there's some amazing cutting edge way to do this. It's the same for all of us. So I like the way you spelled that out. And I don't know of too many industries, unless you're a religious person, a religious leader of some sort, that we get to talk about our higher powers and our spiritual beliefs and bring that to the table, because I think that's part of so many people's recovery as well. There's not a lot of places you get to talk about that openly and without pushback. So I love to hear you talk about that part and how it's important. I hear a lot of people that share those, we each get to create our own belief system and what that looks like, but that it's so important to recovery and to living a wholehearted life.
Definitely. It is so strange. I remember coming into the industry and hearing people talk about things like that. And I was like, you can do that here? That's very strange. I was like, but are you sure? And it was very confusing for me. And I still try to use like discretion and, moderation and figuring out when and where it is appropriate, again, to like speak the truth of what my life looks like on a day-to-day basis, but also being a person that represents like a facility. I have to bear in mind that I always want people to know too that whatever like my direct beliefs aren't getting pushed on everyone. We want to find what everyone's individual journey and goals and path and that looks like. But if I am like speaking to the things that I have done and what has worked for me, I would be remiss to not mention how like that kind of spiritual component, like I've definitely had some massive shifts in perspective that have helped me get to where I am today.
Oh, well, my cup has been filled today. I have loved talking with you and learning about your journey and about, the detox world and how you're making a difference in your space, showing up on your size and all of the things we talked about today, which are just, it's powerful and it's reaffirming, just that human experience.
Oh, thank you guys so much. Thank you for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to do this. I've had such a great time talking with you guys.
Yeah, you have fun energy. Thanks for sharing your passion.
Thank you so much.
One other thing we ought to do is maybe share how people can get a hold of you if they want to make contact with you later.
Totally. I'm happy for anyone to reach out to me either via text or email or whatever works. I am available on LinkedIn as well. That was how we got connected. My name's Sasha Antoun on there. And I'm happy to give you my information if you want to like either post it in the, descriptory section of this. I'm happy to pass that along as well. I love connecting with people, and I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to ask and answer questions. That is what I do every day, and I love being a part of that.
Beautifully said. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing all of that today. And I'm sure people are going to reach out and want to know more.
Oh, I can't wait. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha.